5 minutes after police handcuffed Vanessa Brooks at a Texas gas station. A phone call from the Pentagon would leave an entire police department scrambling for answers. But at that moment, nobody at the Lone Star fuel stop off Interstate 35 had any idea who the quiet woman sitting beside pump number 6 really was. To everyone watching, she looked like an ordinary traveler having a very bad morning. Cell phones were already coming out as customers whispered to one another, trying to figure out what had happened. Some assumed she must have done something serious. Others simply stared. Vanessa sat calmly on the curb near her dark blue SUV, her hands restrained in front of her, her expression composed in a way that seemed almost impossible under the circumstances. The 48-year-old attorney had left San Antonio before sunrise, planning to drive the final 70 miles to Fort Cavazos for a military family recognition ceremony. Her husband had specifically asked her to attend. He had called the night before and said, "I really want you there." Vanessa never missed important family events, especially military ceremonies. She had already driven nearly 200 miles that morning and stopped only because she needed gas and coffee before continuing the trip. At 8:17 a.m., she pulled into the station, filled her tank, and walked inside wearing dark jeans, comfortable sneakers, and a simple gray sweater. Nothing about her appearance attracted attention. She bought a coffee, thanked the cashier, and returned to her vehicle. Less than 3 minutes later, Officer Ethan Cole pulled into the parking lot. Witnesses would later say the young officer immediately focused on Vanessa's luxury SUV. He parked nearby and watched her for several moments before stepping out of his patrol vehicle. No one knew why. No one understood what had caught his attention. But within minutes, a routine stop had turned into a tense public confrontation. Customers exiting the convenience store slowed down to watch. A truck driver standing near the diesel pumps quietly started recording on his phone. Vanessa remained polite throughout the encounter, answering every question and providing identification when asked. Yet the conversation only seemed to grow more intense. Then came the moment that changed everything. Officer Cole informed Vanessa that she was being detained pending further investigation. A stunned silence spread across the parking lot. Even people who had not been paying attention moments earlier stopped what they were doing. Vanessa looked around briefly, took a slow breath, and said something so calmly that several witnesses later repeated it word for word. "Officer, may I please make one phone call?" What happened after that single request would shock everyone standing at that gas station and eventually make headlines across the country. 30 minutes earlier, the morning had looked completely different. Vanessa Brooks had left her hotel in San Antonio just after 6:30, expecting nothing more stressful than light traffic and a long drive north. The sky over Texas was beginning to brighten as she merged onto Interstate 35, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax. Her husband, General Marcus Brooks, had been deployed, traveling, or attending strategic meetings for most of the previous year. Military life had taught Vanessa patience, flexibility, and resilience, but it had also taught her to treasure rare family moments. That was exactly why she had promised Marcus she would attend the recognition ceremony at Fort Cavazos. During their conversation the previous evening, Marcus had sounded unusually excited. He had simply told her that the event would be special and that having her there meant more to him than she realized. Vanessa smiled as she remembered his words. She had known Marcus since college, long before the medals, the stars, and the national headlines. To her, he was still the thoughtful young man who used to bring her coffee during late-night study sessions. Around 8 o'clock, Vanessa stopped at the Lone Star fuel stop to refuel and grab breakfast. The station was busy with commuters, truck drivers, and military families heading toward nearby installations. After filling her SUV, she entered the convenience store, greeted the cashier warmly, and purchased coffee, bottled water, and a breakfast sandwich. Several customers later remembered her because she held the door open for an elderly veteran using a cane. Nothing about the interaction seemed remarkable at the time. As Vanessa returned to her vehicle, she placed her purchases inside and prepared to continue driving. That was when Officer Ethan Cole entered the parking lot. Cole had been with the department for less than 3 years and had recently transferred from a neighboring county. According to dispatch records, He had not been responding to a specific call. He was simply conducting routine patrols along the highway corridor. Witnesses later recalled seeing him slow down immediately after spotting Vanessa's dark blue luxury SUV. He parked nearby and remained inside his patrol vehicle for nearly a minute watching. Vanessa noticed the police cruiser but thought little of it. Military families were accustomed to seeing law enforcement around installations and highways. As she started her engine, Officer Cole activated his emergency lights and motioned for her to remain parked. Confused but cooperative, Vanessa turned off the engine, lowered her window, and waited. When Cole approached, his first question surprised her. He asked if the vehicle belonged to her. Vanessa calmly replied that it did and provided registration documents when requested. Instead of ending the interaction, however, Cole began asking additional questions. Where had she purchased the vehicle? How long had she owned it? Was she traveling alone? Why was she driving toward Fort Cavazos? The questions continued, and with each answer Vanessa provided, the officer appeared less satisfied rather than more. Several customers nearby began paying attention. Something about the encounter no longer felt routine. Vanessa continued answering every question with the same calm tone she had used from the beginning. She explained that she lived in Virginia, that the SUV was registered in her name, and that she was traveling to Fort Cavazos for a military family event. Officer Ethan Cole studied her driver's license for several seconds before looking back at her. "You drove all the way from Virginia in this vehicle by yourself?" he asked. Vanessa nodded. She explained that she had flown into San Antonio the previous evening and rented the hotel room nearby before continuing the trip that morning. Cole then asked why she was visiting the base. Vanessa simply replied that she was attending a family ceremony. The answer did not appear to satisfy him. "What kind of family ceremony?" he asked. Vanessa politely responded that it was a private matter, but that she would gladly provide any documentation necessary. By now, several customers standing near the fuel pumps had stopped pretending not to watch. An older truck driver later said that the conversation sounded less like a routine traffic inquiry and more like an interrogation. Cole asked Vanessa whether she had proof that the SUV belonged to her, even though she had already handed him the registration documents showing her name. Vanessa pointed to the paperwork once again. She remained composed, but she could feel the atmosphere changing. She had spent years working as a civil rights attorney and had represented clients in difficult situations. Experience had taught her that remaining respectful and calm was often the wisest choice during encounters with law enforcement. Officer Cole walked back to his patrol car, apparently running additional checks. Nearly 10 minutes passed. Vanessa remained inside her vehicle with the engine off. Finally, Cole returned. This time, his tone was noticeably firmer. He informed Vanessa that there were discrepancies requiring further investigation. When Vanessa politely asked what discrepancies he was referring to, Cole did not provide a clear explanation. Instead, he asked whether she would consent to a search of the vehicle. Vanessa respectfully declined and stated that she preferred to exercise her legal rights unless there was a specific legal basis for a search. That answer immediately changed the interaction. Cole's expression hardened. He told Vanessa that refusing cooperation could prolong the situation. Vanessa calmly responded that she was fully cooperating and had answered every question asked. A young woman standing near the convenience store quietly began recording on her phone. Another customer shook his head and muttered that something about the encounter did not seem right. The tension in the parking lot continued to grow. Then Officer Cole requested backup. Within minutes, Sergeant Daniel Hayes arrived. After a brief conversation between the two officers, Hayes approached Vanessa's SUV. He introduced himself and repeated many of the same questions she had already answered. Vanessa provided the same information once again. Yet instead of resolving the matter, the arrival of a second officer only made the situation more serious. For the first time that morning, Vanessa realized that she might not be leaving the gas station anytime soon. Sergeant Daniel Hayes carried himself with the confidence of someone who had spent more than 2 decades in law enforcement. Unlike Officer Ethan Cole, his voice was calm and measured, but Vanessa quickly realized that his arrival was not improving the situation. Hayes listened as Cole summarized the encounter, occasionally glancing toward Vanessa's SUV and then back at the paperwork in his hand. After several minutes, Hayes approached the driver's side window and asked Vanessa to step out of the vehicle so they could continue the conversation outside. Vanessa complied immediately. She gathered her purse, locked the SUV, and stood beside the vehicle with her hands visible. Hayes asked again why she was traveling to Fort Cavazos. Vanessa repeated that she was attending a family ceremony on base. "Can you be more specific?" Hayes asked. Vanessa politely explained that the event involved her family and military personnel and that she preferred not to discuss private family matters in a public parking lot. Hayes exchanged a brief look with Cole. The response appeared to increase their suspicion rather than reduce it. By now, nearly a dozen people had gathered near the convenience store entrance. Some pretended to check their phones while quietly observing. Others openly watched. A retired Army veteran wearing a baseball cap stepped closer and asked whether everything was all right. Hayes immediately instructed him to step back. The veteran complied but remained nearby. Vanessa noticed several customers filming. She understood exactly what was happening. A routine stop had become a public spectacle. Hayes then informed Vanessa that because she had declined consent to search the vehicle, they would continue investigating until they were satisfied regarding ownership and travel purpose. Vanessa calmly asked whether there was any evidence that the vehicle was stolen or connected to criminal activity. Neither officer provided a direct answer. Instead, Hayes asked whether she had additional identification, military credentials, or documentation related to the ceremony. Vanessa opened her purse and produced several cards, including her State Bar Association identification. Hayes examined the attorney credential briefly before handing it back. "Attorney," he said quietly. "Yes, sir," Vanessa replied respectfully. "Civil rights law." The words seemed to create an uncomfortable pause. A woman standing near the gas pumps later told reporters that she expected the conversation to end at that moment. Instead, it became even more tense. Officer Cole asked Vanessa whether she was refusing lawful instructions. Vanessa immediately answered that she was not refusing anything and had cooperated fully for more than 20 minutes. She then asked if she was free to leave. Hayes responded that she was being temporarily detained pending further investigation. The answer caused murmurs among several witnesses. The retired veteran shook his head in disbelief. Another customer quietly remarked that the situation no longer made sense. Vanessa remained composed. Years of legal experience had taught her that emotions rarely improved difficult encounters. Still, she could feel dozens of eyes fixed upon her. Standing beside her vehicle in a crowded gas station parking lot, she realized that her ordinary morning had turned into something far more serious than she had ever imagined. The atmosphere at the Lone Star fuel stop shifted from uncomfortable to deeply unsettling. More customers had gathered near the convenience store entrance, and several people continued recording quietly with their phones. Vanessa Brooks stood beside her SUV, maintaining the same calm demeanor she had shown from the beginning. But inside, she knew the situation had crossed a line. Nearly 30 minutes had passed since Officer Ethan Cole first approached her vehicle. She had provided identification, vehicle registration, proof of insurance, and answered every question asked. Yet she was still standing in a parking lot, surrounded by strangers, unable to continue her trip. Sergeant Daniel Hayes stepped aside with Officer Cole for a private conversation near the patrol vehicles. Witnesses could not hear what was being said, but they could see Cole gesturing repeatedly toward Vanessa and her SUV. After several minutes, both officers returned. Hayes informed Vanessa that because they had not yet resolved their concerns, she would be placed under temporary detention while additional verification was completed. Vanessa looked directly at him. "Sergeant, may I ask specifically what concern remains unresolved?" she asked respectfully. Hayes replied that they needed additional time to confirm information related to the vehicle and her stated destination. Vanessa quietly asked whether there had been any report indicating the SUV was stolen. Again, no direct answer came. Instead, Officer Cole instructed her to place her belongings on the hood of the vehicle. The request immediately drew visible reactions from several witnesses. The retired Army veteran who had remained nearby shook his head again. A young mother standing beside her minivan whispered, "She has done everything they asked." Vanessa slowly placed her purse and coffee on the hood. She remained composed. Years of courtroom experience had taught her that dignity often mattered most during difficult moments. Officer Cole then informed Vanessa that she was being formally detained pending investigation and would need to remain under police supervision. Although the officers acted professionally, the announcement stunned many of those watching. The parking lot grew unusually quiet. Vanessa briefly closed her eyes, took a slow breath, and nodded. "I understand," she said softly. She did not argue. She did not raise her voice. She simply complied. As the officers completed the detention process, several witnesses exchanged confused looks. Nothing about the encounter seemed consistent with the serious response unfolding before them. One truck driver later said that he had expected the situation to end at least 20 minutes earlier. Instead, it appeared to be escalating without explanation. Vanessa sat quietly on the curb near pump number 6 while the officers continued speaking with dispatch. The morning Texas sun had climbed higher, and customers came and went, many slowing down to observe the unusual scene. Some quietly offered Vanessa sympathetic smiles. She acknowledged them with small nods. Despite the public embarrassment, she remained remarkably calm. Finally, after several minutes of silence, Vanessa looked toward Sergeant Hayes and spoke in the same measured voice she had used throughout the encounter. "Sergeant, I would like to make one phone call." Hayes hesitated for a moment before nodding. "You may make one call," he said. Vanessa reached into her purse, retrieved her phone, and dialed a number from memory. The call lasted only 12 seconds. When it ended, she placed the phone back into her purse and quietly said, "Thank you. Someone has been informed." No one standing in that parking lot understood how dramatically the next 5 minutes would change everything. The parking lot remained unusually quiet after Vanessa ended the brief phone call. Officer Ethan Cole glanced towards Sergeant Daniel Hayes and quietly asked, "Who did she call?" Vanessa offered no explanation. She simply sat calmly on the curb, her posture relaxed, as though she were waiting for a delayed appointment rather than sitting under police detention in front of dozens of strangers. Her composure seemed to unsettle the officers even more. Most people placed in similar situations became angry, frightened, or argumentative. Vanessa did none of those things. She looked at her watch, took a sip of water, and waited. Several witnesses later said that her calmness changed the mood of the crowd. Instead of assuming she had done something wrong, many people began questioning why the encounter had escalated so dramatically. The retired Army veteran approached Sergeant Hayes once more and politely asked whether there had been an accident or criminal complaint. Hayes thanked him for his concern but declined to discuss the matter. The veteran nodded respectfully and stepped away, but he remained nearby. About 3 minutes after Vanessa ended her call, an unexpected detail caught the attention of a customer standing near the diesel pumps. The customer, a middle-aged man wearing a military contractor badge, noticed a ring on Vanessa's left hand. Even from several feet away, he recognized the distinctive design immediately. It was a military spouse ring featuring the insignia associated with senior command families, something rarely seen outside high-level military circles. Curious, the man quietly moved closer. When Vanessa adjusted her sweater sleeve, he also noticed an elegant bracelet engraved with the words, "Duty, Honor, Country." The contractor exchanged a concerned look with the retired veteran. "I think there is more to this story," he whispered. Meanwhile, Officer Cole continued speaking with dispatch from inside his patrol vehicle. According to later reports, dispatch had already confirmed that Vanessa's driver's license was valid. The SUV was properly registered in her name, and there were no warrants or criminal alerts associated with her. Yet the detention continued. Sergeant Hayes appeared increasingly uncomfortable. He walked over to Vanessa and informed her that they were still waiting on additional information. Vanessa politely acknowledged him. "I understand, Sergeant," she replied. "I appreciate your professionalism." The unexpected response seemed to catch Hayes off guard. Before he could answer, the sound of approaching vehicles drew everyone's attention. Two dark government-issued SUVs entered the gas station parking lot and parked near the patrol cars. They did not display emergency lights, but their appearance immediately changed the atmosphere. Several customers instinctively stopped recording and stepped back. The retired veteran straightened his posture almost automatically. Officer Cole stepped out of his cruiser and stared at the newly arrived vehicles with visible confusion. The doors opened, and several sharply dressed individuals exited. One of them scanned the parking lot, immediately spotted Vanessa, and began walking directly toward her with unmistakable purpose. At that moment, both officers realized that the simple phone call Vanessa had made only minutes earlier was about to transform the entire situation. The man leading the group from the government SUVs moved quickly across the parking lot, his expression serious but controlled. He was dressed in a dark suit, carried a federal identification credential on his belt, and walked with the unmistakable confidence of someone accustomed to high-level responsibility. Behind him were two additional officials and a uniformed Army colonel. Every conversation in the parking lot stopped. Officer Ethan Cole instinctively stepped forward. "Sir, this is an active police investigation," he said. The suited official politely nodded but continued walking. "I understand, officer," he replied. "I need to speak with Mrs. Vanessa Brooks immediately." Hearing Vanessa addressed by name caused both Cole and Sergeant Daniel Hayes to exchange uneasy looks. The official approached Vanessa directly. "Mrs. Brooks, are you all right, ma'am?" he asked respectfully. Vanessa stood slowly. "Yes, thank you, David. I am fine." The familiarity between them immediately changed the atmosphere. The official turned toward Sergeant Hayes. "Sergeant, I am David Reynolds with the Department of Defense Office of Military Family Affairs. We received notification regarding Mrs. Brooks less than 5 minutes ago." Hayes looked surprised. "Department of Defense?" he repeated. Reynolds nodded. "Yes, Sergeant. We would appreciate understanding the basis for her continued detention." Before Hayes could respond, Colonel Richard Lawson stepped forward. The moment he saw Vanessa, he stopped, straightened his posture, and greeted her formally. "Good morning, Mrs. Brooks," he said. "General Brooks asked that we ensure your well-being." Several witnesses audibly gasped. The retired Army veteran removed his cap immediately. Officer Cole looked completely stunned. "General Brooks?" he asked quietly. Colonel Lawson looked at him with visible confusion. "Yes," he said. "General Marcus Brooks." The name landed heavily across the parking lot. Even people with little military knowledge recognized that this was no ordinary family connection. Vanessa remained calm. "Colonel, I appreciate you coming," she said. "I simply informed my husband that I might be delayed." Lawson nodded respectfully. "Ma'am, when the general received your message during a strategic briefing, he was understandably concerned. The Pentagon was notified because your attendance was expected at this morning's ceremony." Sergeant Hayes suddenly appeared uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "you are related to General Marcus Brooks?" Vanessa answered softly. "He is my husband." Complete silence followed. The young woman recording near the gas pumps slowly lowered her phone. Officer Cole stared at Vanessa as though seeing her for the first time. The quiet attorney who had spent nearly an hour answering questions without complaint was not simply a traveler heading to a family event. She was the wife of one of the highest-ranking officers in the United States Army. Yet what unsettled many witnesses most was not Vanessa's identity. It was the realization that she had never mentioned it. She had never demanded special treatment. She had never threatened anyone. She had simply expected to be treated with the same dignity afforded to every American citizen. And now, standing in the middle of a Texas gas station parking lot, everyone present understood that the situation was about to become far more serious. The revelation spread through the parking lot in seconds. People who had been casually watching from a distance suddenly found themselves standing in complete silence. Sergeant Daniel Hayes removed his sunglasses and rubbed his forehead as though trying to process what he had just heard. Officer Ethan Cole looked from Vanessa to Colonel Richard Lawson and back again. "Sir, with all due respect, we had no way of knowing," Cole finally said. Colonel Lawson studied him for a moment before responding. Officer, Mrs. Brooks should not need to identify herself as the spouse of a senior military officer in order to be treated fairly, he said evenly. The words hung heavily in the warm Texas air. Vanessa remained calm. Colonel, I would prefer that we focus on resolving the situation professionally, she said. Lawson nodded immediately. Of course, ma'am. David Reynolds then stepped aside and answered an incoming call on his secure phone. His expression changed almost instantly. After listening for several seconds, he approached Sergeant Hayes. Sergeant, the Department of Defense has requested a full explanation regarding this detention, Reynolds said. Additionally, representatives from the Pentagon legal office are asking whether Mrs. Brooks is currently free to leave. Hayes looked visibly uncomfortable. We are still verifying certain details, he replied. Reynolds glanced toward Vanessa. Which details remain unresolved? He asked. Hayes hesitated. For the first time that morning, neither he nor Officer Cole appeared able to provide a clear answer. Dispatch had already confirmed Vanessa's identification, vehicle registration, insurance status, and travel history. There had been no outstanding warrants, no criminal alerts, and no reports involving the vehicle. Several witnesses standing nearby exchanged knowing looks. The retired Army veteran quietly said, "That is exactly what some of us have been wondering for the last hour." Before anyone could respond, Sergeant Hayes's radio crackled loudly. Dispatch informed him that Police Chief Robert Mills was personally en route to the gas station and expected to arrive within minutes. Hayes acknowledged the message and slowly lowered the radio. Officer Cole stared at the ground. The realization was becoming unavoidable. What had begun as a routine encounter had now attracted the attention of the police chief, Department of Defense officials, and senior military personnel. Vanessa noticed the growing tension among the officers. Despite everything that had happened, she spoke gently. Sergeant Hayes, Officer Cole, I understand that law enforcement officers have difficult jobs, she said. My only concern has always been being treated with dignity and according to the law. Her words seemed to affect Hayes deeply. He nodded quietly. Mrs. Brooks, I appreciate your patience, he said. Just then, another black SUV entered the parking lot, followed closely by an unmarked sedan belonging to the local police administration. As Police Chief Robert Mills stepped out of his vehicle and quickly assessed the scene before him, everyone present understood that the morning was about to take yet another unexpected turn. Police Chief Robert Mills had spent nearly 28 years in law enforcement, and experience had taught him to read a scene within seconds. As he stepped out of his sedan, he immediately noticed several things that troubled him. First, a large crowd had gathered, many holding phones. Second, Department of Defense representatives were already present. Third, a United States Army colonel was standing beside a detained civilian. None of those details belonged in the same ordinary traffic stop. Chief Mills walked directly toward Sergeant Daniel Hayes. Sergeant, I need a complete briefing right now, he said. Hayes quickly summarized the encounter, explaining the concerns regarding the vehicle and Vanessa's travel plans. The chief listened carefully without interrupting. When Hayes finished, Mills asked a simple question. Has dispatch confirmed her identity? Hayes nodded. Yes, sir. Vehicle registration? Confirmed. Outstanding warrants? None, sir. Criminal alerts? None. The chief remained silent for several seconds. Then why is Mrs. Brooks still being detained? He asked quietly. Neither Hayes nor Officer Ethan Cole answered immediately. The silence itself provided an answer. Chief Mills slowly turned toward Vanessa. Mrs. Brooks, I am Chief Robert Mills. First, I want to personally apologize for the delay and inconvenience you have experienced this morning. Vanessa stood and extended her hand. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. Mills shook her hand respectfully. Ma'am, based on the information currently available to me, I see no reason for your continued detention. The statement caused visible relief among several witnesses. The retired Army veteran smiled for the first time all morning. Nearby, the young woman who had recorded much of the incident quietly whispered, Finally, Chief Mills then requested private conversations with Officer Cole and Sergeant Hayes. Although no one could hear the discussion, both officers appeared increasingly uncomfortable as the chief spoke. Meanwhile, David Reynolds received another secure call. After ending the conversation, he approached Vanessa. "Mrs. Brooks, your husband asked me to inform you that he is unable to leave his briefing, but he wanted me to tell you personally that he is grateful you are safe." Vanessa smiled softly. "Please let him know I am perfectly fine," she said. Reynolds nodded. "He also asked me to remind you not to miss breakfast at the ceremony." Several people nearby laughed gently, and for the first time that morning, the tension eased. A few minutes later, Chief Mills returned. "Mrs. Brooks, you are completely free to continue your travels," he said. "Additionally, I will be ordering an immediate administrative review of everything that occurred here today." Vanessa thanked him sincerely. Then she surprised everyone. "Chief, I am not interested in anyone losing a career," she said. "I only hope this situation encourages reflection and training." Chief Mills looked genuinely moved. "Ma'am, that is an extraordinarily gracious response," he said. As Vanessa gathered her belongings and prepared to leave, many witnesses approached to offer support. Yet the story of what happened at the Lone Star fuel stop was far from over. Unknown to almost everyone present, several videos recorded that morning had already begun spreading across social media, and by sunset, millions of Americans would be discussing what had happened in that small Texas parking lot. Vanessa Brooks arrived at Fort Cavazos nearly 90 minutes later than planned, but word of the incident had somehow reached the installation before she did. As her SUV approached the security gate, the military police officer on duty recognized her name immediately and respectfully welcomed her onto the base. Colonel Richard Lawson, who had driven separately from the gas station, met her outside the ceremonial hall. "Mrs. Brooks, everyone is relieved that you made it safely," he said. Vanessa smiled warmly. "Thank you, Colonel. I appreciate all the assistance this morning." Inside the hall, military families, senior officers, and civilian guests had already gathered. The atmosphere was formal yet welcoming. Several spouses approached Vanessa to ask whether she was all right. She assured each of them that she was fine and encouraged them not to let the morning overshadow the purpose of the ceremony. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Washington, General Marcus Brooks remained in a secure conference room inside the Pentagon. Although he had continued participating in the strategic briefing, those closest to him could tell that he was concerned. During a scheduled break, he finally received a detailed update from David Reynolds. The general listened silently from beginning to end. When the briefing concluded, he thanked Reynolds and asked only one question. "Was my wife treated respectfully after the misunderstanding was identified?" Reynolds answered honestly, "Yes, General." Once Chief Mills arrived, the situation was resolved professionally. General Brooks nodded. "Good," he said quietly. "No one should receive special treatment because of who they know, but everyone deserves equal treatment under the law." Later that afternoon, videos recorded at the gas station began appearing online. The footage showed Vanessa calmly answering questions, sitting quietly while detained, and continuing to speak respectfully even after her identity became known. The clips spread rapidly across social media platforms. Millions of viewers watched in disbelief as commentators debated what had happened. Many people focused on one striking detail. Vanessa had never once mentioned her husband's position. She had never demanded preferential treatment. She had never attempted to use influence to change the outcome. Instead, she had simply expected to be treated fairly as an ordinary citizen. News organizations soon contacted the police department requesting statements. Chief Robert Mills released a brief public announcement confirming that an internal administrative review had been initiated. He emphasized that the department was committed to transparency and professional accountability. By evening, community leaders, veterans organizations, and civil rights groups had all issued statements expressing concern, while also praising the peaceful resolution of the incident. Back at Fort Cavazos, the ceremony concluded successfully. As guests prepared to leave, Vanessa finally received a private phone call from Marcus. "I heard you had quite a morning," he said gently. Vanessa laughed softly for the first time all day. It was certainly memorable, she replied. Marcus paused before speaking again. I am proud of how you handled yourself. Vanessa looked across the parade grounds where military families were embracing loved ones returning from assignments. I only did what any citizen should be able to do, she said. I remained calm and trusted that eventually someone would listen. Neither of them realized that the consequences of that morning were only beginning to unfold. The administrative review began the very next morning. Chief Robert Mills understood that public trust in his department depended on transparency, especially now that millions of people had already seen portions of the encounter online. He assembled a review panel consisting of senior supervisors, training officers, and representatives from the department's professional standards division. Body camera footage, dispatch recordings, witness statements, and video recordings from bystanders were all collected for examination. As investigators reconstructed the timeline, several troubling patterns quickly emerged. Dispatch logs confirmed that Vanessa Brooks had been fully identified within minutes of the initial stop. Her driver's license, vehicle registration, and insurance information had all been verified without issue. Investigators also discovered that there had never been any report connecting her vehicle to criminal activity. The review panel determined that the detention had continued long after the original concerns had been resolved. Chief Mills personally met with Sergeant Daniel Hayes and Officer Ethan Cole. Neither officer had a prior history of serious misconduct, but both acknowledged that the situation had escalated unnecessarily. Cole admitted that he had allowed subjective impressions to influence his judgment. Hayes acknowledged that he should have ended the encounter sooner once dispatch confirmed the information. Chief Mills listened carefully. This review is not only about policy, he told them. It is about remembering that every citizen deserves the same dignity and presumption of respect. Meanwhile, public interest in the incident continued growing. National news networks invited legal experts, retired military officers, and former police chiefs to discuss what had happened. Many commentators focused on Vanessa's remarkable composure throughout the ordeal. Civil rights organizations praised her restraint and professionalism. Veterans groups also issued statements emphasizing that military families should never receive special privileges, but that no American should be subjected to prolonged detention without clear justification. Surprisingly, Vanessa declined nearly every interview request. Instead, she released a short written statement through her law office. My hope is that this experience encourages constructive dialogue, improved training, and mutual respect between communities and law enforcement, she wrote. The goal should never be embarrassment or punishment. The goal should always be improvement. The statement received widespread praise across political and social lines. Even more surprising was General Marcus Brooks's response. Despite intense media attention, he refused all interview requests and instructed Pentagon staff not to comment publicly beyond confirming that his wife had safely attended the ceremony. Privately, however, he sent a handwritten note to Chief Mills thanking him for addressing the matter directly and professionally once he arrived on scene. For Chief Mills, the note reinforced an important lesson. Leadership, he realized, was often measured not during moments of comfort, but during moments of difficulty. Within days, the department announced mandatory refresher training focused on constitutional policing, implicit bias awareness, and effective communication during citizen encounters. For many observers, the changes represented an important first step. For Vanessa Brooks, they represented something even more meaningful, proof that difficult experiences could still produce positive change. Over the following weeks, the changes initiated by Chief Robert Mills began producing unexpected results throughout the department and the community. Officers who had initially viewed the additional training as a routine administrative requirement soon discovered that the sessions were unlike anything they had experienced before. Instead of focusing solely on policies and procedures, the training incorporated real scenarios, community discussions, and testimony from citizens, veterans, legal experts, and law enforcement professionals. One of the case studies examined during the program involved the incident at the Lone Star fuel stop. Although names were removed, nearly everyone in the department recognized the circumstances. The discussions were candid and, at times, uncomfortable. Officers spoke openly about how assumptions, unconscious biases, and incomplete information could influence decision-making during seemingly ordinary encounters. Sergeant Daniel Hayes participated fully in every session. Colleagues noticed that he became one of the strongest advocates for the new training approach. During one meeting, Hayes addressed younger officers directly. "Experience does not make us immune from mistakes," he said. "If anything, experience should teach us humility." Officer Ethan Cole's journey proved even more difficult. The public attention surrounding the incident had been overwhelming. For several weeks, he was reassigned to administrative duties while the review process continued. During that time, Cole chose to meet privately with several retired law enforcement leaders recommended by Chief Mills. He also requested additional training beyond what the department required. According to colleagues, the experience profoundly affected him. Several months later, during a community outreach event, Cole publicly acknowledged that he had allowed assumptions to shape his decisions that morning. "I failed to see a citizen first," he said. "That failure changed me." Meanwhile, Vanessa Brooks quietly returned to her normal life. She resumed her legal practice, continued mentoring young attorneys, and largely avoided public attention. Nevertheless, letters continued arriving at her office from across the country. Some came from military families. Others came from police officers, community leaders, and ordinary citizens who had seen themselves reflected in her experience. Many thanked her for responding with grace rather than anger. Vanessa personally answered as many letters as possible. In nearly every response, she emphasized the same principle. Meaningful change rarely begins with humiliation. It begins with honest reflection and a willingness to improve. Several months after the incident, Chief Mills invited Vanessa to speak during the department's annual leadership conference. She accepted. Standing before more than 200 officers, supervisors, and community representatives, Vanessa shared the story not as a victim, but as someone who believed deeply in both accountability and partnership. When she finished speaking, the audience stood and applauded for nearly 2 minutes. Later that afternoon, Chief Mills reflected that the gas station encounter, painful as it had been, had ultimately strengthened relationships throughout the entire community. What had started as a misunderstanding on an ordinary Texas morning had evolved into something far larger, an opportunity for growth, understanding, and lasting change. Nearly 1 year after the morning that changed so many lives, the Lone Star fuel stop looked exactly the same. Travelers still stopped for coffee, truck drivers still filled their tanks before long trips, and military families still passed through on their way to and from Fort Cavazos. Yet for those who remembered what had happened there, the place carried a different meaning. On a bright spring morning, Vanessa Brooks returned to the station for the first time since the incident. She had been invited by Chief Robert Mills to attend the unveiling of a new community partnership initiative between local law enforcement, veterans organizations, and civic groups. As Vanessa stepped out of her SUV, several employees recognized her immediately. The store manager walked outside and warmly welcomed her back. "Mrs. Brooks, we are honored that you came," he said. Vanessa smiled. "Thank you. I am glad to be here." The event drew a large crowd. Community leaders, police officers, military families, and local residents gathered under a temporary canopy near the fuel pumps. Chief Mills spoke first. He described how one difficult morning had forced an entire department to examine itself honestly. He spoke about accountability, humility, and the importance of treating every person with dignity. Then he invited Vanessa to the podium. The crowd grew silent. Vanessa looked around the parking lot for several moments before speaking. "The lesson from that day was never about rank, influence, or status," she began. "Most people learned who my husband was. But the truth is, none of that should have mattered." She paused. "Every person who walks into a gas station, drives down a highway, or interacts with law enforcement deserves respect, fairness, and dignity. Not because of who they know, not because of what they own, not because of their title, simply because they are human beings." Many in the audience nodded quietly. Some wiped away tears. Vanessa continued. "What happened here could have left people divided. Instead, Many chose reflection, accountability, and growth. That choice changed everything. After the ceremony concluded, Officer Ethan Cole approached Vanessa privately. Over the past year, he had completed additional training, participated in community outreach programs, and worked to rebuild trust. "Mrs. Brooks," he said quietly, "I have wanted to thank you for your grace. You could have chosen anger. Instead, you chose to help us improve." Vanessa smiled gently. "Growth begins when people are willing to learn," she said. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do afterward." As Vanessa prepared to leave, Chief Mills walked her to her vehicle. "You know," he said, "this department will never forget that morning." Vanessa looked across the busy parking lot and smiled. "Neither will I," she replied, "but I will remember it for a different reason. It reminded me that even difficult moments can lead to understanding, and that respect should never depend on discovering who someone is. Respect should be where every encounter begins."